Hi, I'm Tom Zimmerman from the EMDR podcast. This is a short episode about some of the common things that are in many trauma psychotherapies that are highly effective at moving memories from one part of the brain to the other. So in the last few years, really in the last, I would say probably dozen years, there have been a small flurry of therapies that have developed around what we've learned about memory reconsolidation in neuroscience. And I know neuroscience makes a lot of people's heads kind of go, it's difficult, complicated stuff, but a lot of what we've learned can be translated in very, very sensible, easy ways that translate directly into the understanding of these psychotherapies that we're going to talk about. So when trauma happens, we learn things, right? We learn things about ourselves and the world, and at least some of that information is stored as implicit information. What implicit information is it is a package of information that includes the memory. It may include raw sensory information. It often includes information, shortcuts, other shortcuts about the self and the world, what we've learned. So inside implicit information, there may be pretty deeply encoded negative beliefs about the self and the world. So all of that can be stored in that packaged information. And humans, for as long as we've had this brain, have been trying to make sense of some of this implicit information. What we've learned is that when we load, or when a memory loads into awareness, there's a window of several hours in which we might, and the key and operative term is might, be able to do something or transform that memory. So the problem is, what often happens is that when a memory gets activated, all of these defenses come in that prevent that memory from really having any chance of moving in an adaptive direction, the way our brains are kind of wired for it to move. But yet these defenses, many of which are very, very cultural, and also the product of other implicit chunks of information, make it really, really hard to resolve trauma on our own, even though that's what we've been trying to do all of our lives. So what we've learned from memory reconsolidation research is that if you activate a memory, what you need to do is present information in a package that's tolerable, right, which isn't itself triggering in any way. You need to present information that challenges the information and the prediction that is in that memory. And then we do this, right? We do this slide activation, present counter information, slide activation, prevent counter information, over and over and over. And from a memory reconsolidation perspective, that's how you can pretty rapidly process a memory. So one of the early explicit memory reconsolidation approaches is Bruce Ecker's Coherence therapy, which really does explore the negative beliefs that's in that implicit chunk of information. And then we construct just the right, antidote for that, right? And then we have this experiential back and forth. And then that can help a memory move pretty quickly into normal memory. So again, let's think about this process, because what you're going to be seeing me do quite a bit in this little episode is this. This is what healing looks like in a very transformative, in transformative psychotherapies. It just does. There's this back and forth. So in these therapies, there are several key components. One of those is activation. And that activation can occur on a very broad spectrum. So in flash approaches, we go out of our way not to activate the memory. Whereas EMDR, we may go into that memory at the worst part, right? And we may work on one of the worst memories, right? Worst memories, worst part. So EMDR is one of those approaches that's not, not afraid of activation. Even somatic experiencing has activation. Activation generates stuff for the next big common thing in all of these psychotherapies that are really transformative, which is noticing. So noticing is this part of that back and forth. Noticing in somatic experiencing is pretty explicit. It's pretty bodily. You're guided to notice. Noticing is the bright yellow line in the center of the EMDR road. And noticing, and from a flash perspective, is done in the calm scene, right? Which again, noticing in this calm scene. So again, activation is a key point. Noticing is a key point. The other thing is, it is this shifting of attention and shifting of focus back and forth that tends to be a key part in the transformation. So in EMDR, there are multiple shifts. So number one, when we activate a memory, typically there's a shift from the memory channel, right? There's a shift from the memory channel to what we actually notice, which may be distress. So, and how is that? This a memory reconsolidation approach. It's a memory reconsolidation approach because what are you noticing? What are you noticing right here that is challenging that explicit information, that implicit information that's in that memory? Well, what you're noticing is that you're having an experience and you're able to notice it. You're having an experience and you're not overwhelmed by it. You're having an experience and it's not happening right here, right now, even though you've activated that memory. So even as you're noticing, a lot of what you're noticing is, look at me right here, right now, handling this, right? So there's that part. There's the activation, noticing the distress. And interestingly, there's another one of these that goes on in EMDR therapy. So there's the activation and the noticing, and then there's the coming into the present, right? There's the coming into the right here, right now in EMDR when we have these check-ins. So if activation and noticing is a kind of seesaw, right? On the end of this seesaw, there's like another seesaw that's going right here in which we're coming in and out of the present. And again, I mean, if nothing else, we're coming more deeply into the present. Because why? Because your therapist is in the present. So, and our lens is changing from here to here, right? It's so that shift of attention, shift of focus is one of the things that's really common in these therapies that are transformative. And EMDR, there again, there's this, and here there's this. And if we think about flash, flash is really, really cool in that we go out of our way to lightly activate, right? We activate and immediately container, right? So activation and containering are right there. I mean, we'll go right from one hand to the other, activation and then containering. And then what are we doing? We're going into the calm scene. And what is the calm scene? The calm scene is from this memory reconsolidation approach. It is the opposite, the antidote to the implicit information that is encoded in that cluster of neurons, right? The calm scene is where we're putting all of our focus. And because we haven't snapped the mousetrap of the amygdala, what we're doing is we're doing this. Activate the memory, container, calm scene. Activate the memory, container, calm scene. So here's our seesaw right there. And like in EMDR, There, at the end of this seesaw, there's another one. So what are we doing when we're in the calm scene? We're blinking. And what do you need to do to blink? You need to come into the present. So many calm scenes may be dissociative. They may be here. And then what we're doing, or even if they're a process that we're imagining. And then what the blinks do is they cause a disruption. And they cause us to be present for a moment. So again, calm scene, disrupt it, go back into the calm scene, disrupt it, calm scene, disrupt it. So can we see that this is just different versions, just placing emphasis in different places? In many of these approaches to therapy that are rapid, transformative, and really do lead to deep, astonishing change. So again, many therapies that produce rapid, astonishing healing have these components: activation, noticing, and shifts of attention. So, or shifts of focus, right? So think about it. Think about how these things and these therapies may just be emphasizing. It may be the same dance, just a slightly different music, or it may be, it may be really similar processes where we just direct our attention in slightly different areas. So, and if these therapies are bizarre, if they're woo-woo, if they're strange, then in some ways, I'm going to make the case that they're all bizarre in very similar ways. So, and by the way, if they're bizarre because of cultural reasons. Let's think about this a tiny bit. Why would activation be culturally taboo, right? Activation may be culturally taboo once we kind of culturally outsource the dealing of trauma solely to the individual. There are, and we can assume there have been many historical cultures where trauma was a problem of the community, where individual trauma was a problem of the community. Noticing, what is it in Western culture that's so freaking triggered by noticing, right? Why do we build our survival on not noticing, right? So noticing is really central in many of these forms of healing. And why? Why would noticing be so triggering? Can we imagine a time when noticing may have been incredibly important? Can we imagine a time when, at a time when our brains were developed, really hundreds of thousands of years ago, when these parts of our brains are developing, where, the somatic is sacred, right? So there may be a very deep relevance in somatic sensations that may, in the context of healing rituals, really need our attention, right? And then doing this, this could also be a big part. This could also be a big part in how humans have healed forever, right? Going in and out of things, directing our attention here, directing our attention there. There's something about shifts of focus that are just really central to this work. And my guess is that when humans healed, before we, really complicated things culturally, when humans healed, they healed in these ways. They healed using these ingredients. And we're discovering them now. They are bizarre. They seem bizarre. But I promise you, they're no more bizarre than how we've been trying inefficiently to process our trauma for as long as we've been human and as long as we've had these brains. Especially in more modern eras, we have been trying to process trauma. Your clients have been trying to process trauma in astonishingly inefficient ways. And when you do that, what we can assume when you unzip, right? Other people have described implicit memory as a zip file, right? It's encoded in there. When you unzip memory and a memory comes into the present, that memory either gets resolved or it gets reconsolidated, right? It gets reconsolidated here or it gets reconsolidated back in the limbic brain. And if what we do, right, when that memory is in awareness, is we dump a whole bunch of guilt, shame, blame, responsibility on it, then we are actually revising that memory. Have you ever had a traumatic memory that has been recoded based on subsequent experiences more and more and more negatively, right? Maybe you had a bad experience when you were a kid that was just a really bad experience, but then it keeps opening up in awareness, other information keeps coming in, and it becomes even more evidence that that you don't belong here, even more evidence that there's something deeply, deeply wrong with you, or deeply, deeply wrong with the way the universe treats you. So again, we can unzip memory, move it into normal memory. That is what all healing of trauma is moving memories into normal memories. And if a memory is not behaving like a more normal memory after you've done this work, then that memory hasn't been fully unzipped. So that memory needs to behave like a normal memory. So here we are in a really remarkable era where we have multiple ways to unzip implicit information and resolve it. We were not entirely sure 20 years ago from a neuroscience perspective that was easy to do. I see that. My trauma therapist friends see that all day in the work that we do with clients. So thank goodness we are intuiting our way back into ways of healing that are deep, that are transformative. And I am glad to be there in a therapy room, in a therapy context, and sit as proxy for a client's community, sit as proxy to witness this remarkable dance that people do as they heal and as they recover. So again, if healing is bizarre, is it really more bizarre in these approaches than what we've been trying to do so ridiculously, inefficiently all of our lives? So thank goodness in this early part of the 21st century, we know how humans heal. We are not confused about that. A good trauma therapist knows multiple ways that humans can heal and can reconcile the self from the past. That is only good news. So let's spread it, let's share it, and let's continue to develop, continue to develop these therapies that leverage processes that have always been with us. Thank you.